Picture this. You're swathed in layers of petticoats and corsets, topped with a hoop skirt so enormous it could pass for a small tent. You're at a royal ball. Lavish chandeliers cast a golden glow over the swirling dancers. You stand among the nobles, delicately sipping tea from a porcelain cup. Suddenly an urgent need arises, a nature call. Now what? How do you lift all that fabric? You glance around, searching for the nearest exit. You slip away, carefully navigating the maze of fabric and etiquette, determined to maintain your dignity as you make your way to the powder room. Where would you even go? And more importantly, how did women manage menstruation in those elaborate dresses? Welcome to the Victorian era, an age of elegance, rigid decorum, and truly perplexing hygiene challenges. For decades, Victorian women were confined in crinolines and voluminous gowns, embodying the era's strict fashion standards. Queen Victoria herself set the tone as a leading icon of this distinctive style. These voluminous garments embodied the ideals of femininity, grace, and decorum. Yet beneath their opulent layers, a daily struggle unfolded, one rarely acknowledged in the pages of history. In the early Victorian era, flushing toilets and underground sewers existed only in the realm of imagination. Europeans had yet to adopt even the basic idea of a toilet. When nature called, you answered, no matter where you were. As the old saying goes, when you've got to go, you've got to go. It was simply a fact of life. Without indoor plumbing, people had to relieve themselves wherever possible, behind trees, out in open fields, or even inside their own homes. Yes, you heard that correctly. Inside. Ever heard the phrase, not a pot to piss in? It wasn't just a colorful insult. It was a harsh truth for many. The pot was a chamber pot, a basic bowl used to collect urine and feces. If you didn't own one, your only option was to step outside and hope for a moment of privacy. But the streets were far from quiet. Victorians would toss the contents of these pots straight out the window, splattering them onto the cobblestones below. High-heeled shoes and umbrellas weren't merely fashion statements. They were essential survival gear in a city where the sky could rain down waste. The chamber pot, known as a jerry in British slang, was once a household essential. It came with a lid, and after use, the lid was clamped down tight. But that lid wasn't just for courtesy, it was a warning. This pot is full. Approach at your own risk. In the opulent homes of Victorian nobles and royals, chamber pots were never on display. Yet don't be deceived. They were everywhere, cleverly concealed within ornate cabinets, tucked inside elegant furniture, or discreetly built into chairs. Servants hurried through the halls, inspecting and emptying them several times a day. Proof that even great wealth could not escape the call of nature. If you were wealthy, your bathroom might be a private wooden bench, concealing a chamber pot beneath. Yet, regardless of how refined the home, one question remained. Where did all that waste end up? Enter the garderobe, a medieval-style toilet perched high on the upper floors of buildings, often jutting precariously over streets or alleyways below. When the chamber pot needed emptying, the solution was straightforward. Open the window and toss the contents out. To spare unsuspecting passers-by from a sudden soaking, a warning shout would echo through the street. Gardello? French for watch out for the water. It was a courteous alert that something decidedly discourteous was about to rain down from above. The stench was unbearable. Homes reeked, streets overflowed, and entire cities drowned in their own filth. Some roads had raised stone steps, allowing pedestrians to leap over the flowing waste. But here's the real twist. During the Napoleonic and English Civil Wars, government agents went door to door collecting the contents of chamber pots. Why? Because urine, yes, urine, was processed to extract saltpeter, a vital ingredient in the production of gunpowder. Your urine was, quite literally, fueling the war effort. Meanwhile, women of the era were swathed in layers of crinolines, petticoats, overskirts, and bodices, so many layers that undergarments like knickers were often deemed unnecessary. With all that fabric swirling and billowing, no one noticed what was missing beneath. That's right. Through much of the Victorian era, ladies strolled about without wearing knickers. It wasn't until late in the era that those enormous bell-shaped crinolines began catching the wind, toppling women over in the streets, that modesty demanded a new solution. Only then did society murmur, perhaps it's time for drawers. But these weren't what you might imagine. Early Victorian underwear, crotchless. Two pant legs joined only at the waist, with a split down the center exactly where it counted. Overlapping folds of cotton provided just enough modesty until you squatted and they parted like curtains rising on a stage. Why? Because no woman wanted to hoist 20 pounds of petticoats, shifts, and skirts every time nature called. These open crotch drawers enabled a woman to lower herself gracefully and discreetly over a chamber pot, preserving her modesty from all but the most immediate onlookers. So, how did it work? Chamber pots for women were uniquely designed, not round like the typical ones for men, but oval-shaped with gently scooped interiors, allowing them to fit comfortably between the thighs. A lady would discreetly position the pot beneath her skirts. No need to squat, just a subtle adjustment beneath the fabric. If done properly, no one in the room would ever notice. At lavish balls and grand social gatherings, entire retiring rooms were reserved for this purpose. Inside, several pots stood prepared, while maids waited nearby, poised like nurses on a battlefield. One attendant gently lifted the layers of the lady's gown, while another carefully placed the pot beneath her. Once finished, a swift wipe with a damp cloth restored her composure, and she returned to the ballroom as if nothing had happened. Not all women enjoyed such comforts. For many, the process was far more basic and harsh. A pot on the floor, skirts hitched up, a quick squat and cleaning up with whatever was available. Old newspapers, leaves, even corn cobs. But don't worry, we'll explore those delightful details a little later. At the foundation of every woman's wardrobe was the linen shift. Soft, easy to wash, and frequently changed. Sometimes it was replaced daily, other times with each new ensemble. Maids and servants wore far fewer layers and lived without the luxury of elaborate gowns or private retiring rooms. In the Victorian world, privacy was a rare privilege, one that few even thought to expect, especially when it came to something as simple as using the toilet. Modesty vanished when nature called. In poorer households, entire families relieved themselves openly, without privacy. There were no separate water closets, no locked doors, just the pot, the floor, or the yard. At high society gatherings, gentlemen would casually wander into the garden, discreetly relieving themselves among the roses. But now, let's get to the gritty part. The question everyone wonders about but never dares to ask. How did Victorians wipe their bottoms? Brace yourself. One of the most widely used tools in the early Victorian era was the dried corn cob, corn on the cob with the kernels removed. People would rotate the cob like a primitive roller brush to thoroughly clean the area. And if that sounds primitive, keep in mind these were far from delicate instruments. They were reused repeatedly, often cleaned only sporadically, if they were cleaned at all. Another favorite, the sea sponge on a stick. After each use, it was dipped into a communal bucket of salt water or vinegar, then used again and again, over and over. And it wasn't just the Victorians. Early humans wiped with rocks, dirt, and clay, the very earth itself. Comfort wasn't the point. Cleanliness, that's debatable. It was about doing what had to be done. Other items ended up at the rear as well. Leaves, straw, and, believe it or not, seashells. You can probably guess how that turned out. As paper became more widely available and affordable, Victorians increasingly turned to printed materials, newspapers, catalogs, and magazines. If you've ever wondered what became of last month's issue, it may have found its way into the chamber pot. Toilet paper, as we know it, didn't start to take form until the late 1800s when the first patents appeared. It wasn't until the early 1900s, however, that it was mass-produced into the soft, rolled sheets we use today. Before that, let's just say a visit to the bathroom was far from the refreshing experience we enjoy today. So, how did Victorian women handle menstruation beneath layers of fabric and steel-caged crinolines? First, it's important to understand that they experience fewer periods than women today. Why? There are three main reasons. Puberty typically began around the same age as it does today, between 12 and 14. However, menopause often arrived much earlier, sometimes as early as a woman's mid-30s. Additionally, poor nutrition and constant physical labor left many women with low body fat, frequently resulting in irregular menstrual cycles. But having fewer periods didn't mean having none at all. When that time of the month arrived, Victorian women faced it without pads, tampons, or any disposable products. Instead, they relied on their own resourcefulness. Women did not wear tight-fitting underwear. Instead, their primary undergarment was a linen shift. A long, washable layer designed to protect costly dresses from body oils and stains. But when their period began, they turned to something called the tea bandage. Picture a primitive bikini bottom, tied at the waist and secured with a strip of cloth that ran between the legs. Inside, it was packed with absorbent rags. If a woman was too poor to afford cloth, she might use moss, sheep's wool, or layers of grass, anything she could find to absorb the blood. These makeshift rags were never discarded. Instead, they were carefully washed, dried, and reused month after month. Women often had to change their tea bandages as many as 12 to 20 times a day, depending on their flow. The constant routine was exhausting, uncomfortable, and entirely unavoidable. On milder days, some women opted for thicker petticoats, trusting the added layers to catch whatever needed catching. As the Victorian era progressed, split-crotch drawers grew popular, though they provided little genuine protection. They were created for convenience in the bathroom, never with menstruation in mind. Yet through it all, women were expected to stay graceful, composed, and completely silent about their struggles. Pain, blood, and odor. It all had to be concealed beneath layers of silk, lace, and unwavering discipline. No one spoke of it, yet every woman endured it. So how did Victorians clean those enormous floor-sweeping dresses? The ones with long trains, delicate lace, ruffles, and endless yards of velvet? The truth is, they didn't wash them the way we do today. Victorian laundry was a punishing ordeal, a physically exhausting ritual of hauling water, scrubbing with harsh soap, and relentless, back-breaking labor. In many households, this daunting task was undertaken only twice a year, during the dreaded event known as the Great Wash. Imagine waiting 6 months before washing your clothes. That's not laziness, it's survival. Victorian dresses weren't simply tossed into a tub with detergent. Full washings were rare, even dangerous. Water and soap could easily ruin delicate fabrics. Instead, women freshened their dresses by dusting them with talcum powder, brushing away the residue, and with it, the scent of sweat and skin. The smell wasn't gone, it was merely masked. If a dress wasn't being worn, it was meticulously folded and stored in cedar-lined trunks or closets, designed to keep out moths and insects. These garments were more than mere clothing. They were treasured works of craftsmanship, sewn with remarkable skill, intricate detail, and the finest materials available. And yet, these garments were worn until they were threadbare, or until their stench became so overpowering it announced itself before you even entered the room. But beneath those elaborate gowns, concealed from sight, lay the true barrier against grime. Layer upon layer of washable undergarments, shifts, chemises, petticoats, and crinolines. These garments absorbed sweat and shielded the valuable outerwear. They could be scrubbed by hand in boiling water with harsh soap, often by overworked maids or laundresses. Victorian beauty demanded a steep price: sweat, time, and an unmistakable scent. So here's the real question. If given the chance, would you turn back the clock and live this way? Draped in silk and soot, wading through filthy streets, masking body odor with powder, and handling periods with nothing but moss and rags. Let us know in the comments below.